All right. Just to kind of give a little bit of a background introduction to today's webinar. This webinar is one tiny little aspect that is inside Accugraph, and we call it the Kidney Return Protocol. And if you've received any of your newest emails, it's a new aspect that's been added to Accugraph 5 recently, and so there have been some videos and some updates on it. And I'm going to share some of the background on it, where it came from, how I'm using it in the clinic, and give you, it's one tiny little piece of the puzzle within Accugraph, but it's a very powerful piece. So we're going to talk about the Kidney Return Protocol. And I want you to recognize that this is kind of an advanced practitioner thought process. So if you're a brand new Accugraph user, you're getting some of the inner details that we teach in our advanced training. And we're going to talk more about that if you want to get more training on this subject and other subjects similar to it within our the background within Accugraph. And so if you're a new practitioner, recognize that this is a little pearl that you're gaining. And if you're a practitioner who's been around for a while, I would expect that what we're about to teach you is going to kick things up a notch in your clinic. So with that, I think I'm going to take my screen off, my face off, and move on to the slide. So I'm excited to do this webinar with Dr. Larson. He is the one who created all the background information on how this protocol showed up in Accugraph, and I'm the one using it in the clinic on a regular basis. So we'll tag team with this webinar. So what is the Kidney Return Protocol? The Kidney Return Protocol is a Japanese style, based off of a Japanese style of acupuncture, and it is an advanced treatment strategy that you might think to use if your patient has really low energy levels. So if you need to boost qi and boost up energy levels, this would be a protocol that you would want to use. So it's not something that I use every day in for every patient, but when the right occasion arises, this is one of the protocols that I use. So let's talk about where it came from. If you've done any training through Jake Fratkin and you've been following along with us regarding the divergent channels, you'll find that Dr. Erie is the one who first created it. And Dr. Erie was a mentor of Dr. Mikishima. And he created it first, and then Mikishima began using it. And I believe that in the 1970s or 80s, I had some notes that printed off on our printer that if somebody's listening in who's in the back office, if you could grab that piece of paper and bring it to me. I was doing a little research this morning on when this came about, and it's a protocol that came about later, and it's been kind of fun to watch the progress and the history of how all of these divergent channels came about. In the channel divergences, there's a quote, and I don't like to just read a big long quote, but this is pretty specific, and we're gonna talk about this. The Kidney Return Protocol serves as one of the most immediate applications of Shima's own approach to channel divergence therapy, and provides an ideal starting point for acupuncturists who wish to begin incorporating the channel divergent therapies into their practice. So if you haven't been using the ion pumping cords or using the channel divergences, this is one tiny little aspect that you could begin like right away using it. And it's a very simple treatment approach, and it's one aspect, and we'll talk more as we go on. But if you want to begin diving into the divergences, this is a great place to start. So we're going to talk about why it was created. The divergent channel treatment, which we've done a lot of extensive training on, was the foundational training for divergent channels, and Mikishima used the Kidney Return Protocol as an extension of the divergent channel treatment. So within Accugraph, you'll find all of the the extraordinary, the divergent, the left-right treatment, and we've done whole webinars and whole advanced trainings on this. And this is not where the kidney return protocol shows up in AccuGraph, but recognize that the treatment thought process and the strategies used are another leg, if you will, of the divergent channel treatment. So this treatment also includes ion pumping cords, just like the divergent channel treatment. And this is a picture, actually a picture of a patient I was treating yesterday doing this protocol. So if you want, what you want to recognize from this point forward, I'm going to be specifically talking about the kidney return protocol. And like I said, that protocol is an extension of the divergent treatment plan, and that we have many, many resources on the divergent treatments and other webinars that you can watch. So I totally recommend this book, The Channel Divergences by Mikishima. I recommend 2 webinars that we did on the divergent treatment. It's the patients are getting better faster. There's a part 1 and a part 2. If you went to the AccuGrowth Symposium in 2018 in the spring in San Diego, we taught about the divergent treatment, and that is now available to enterprise users. It is in your account, and that training is there and available. Recently, there were emails that went out for AccuGraph 5 advances and things that we just released, so our big new release. There are some videos that talk about divergent treatment and also the kidney return protocol. And then there's some blog posts I highly recommend if you want to dig deeper. We've shared Dr. Fratkin's blog post. There was a 4-part series, and he dives into the 3-level acupuncture balance. And honestly, that is where I was introduced to all of these aspects, was Dr. Jake Fratkin. And some of our advanced training has him within those trainings as well. And then Dr. Larson wrote a blog recently, what are the background colors behind the divergent treatment protocol? That's some advancements that we've done in just the last little while for divergence. And then I've got a case study that is on the blog as well. Dr. Larson, do you have some more to add to this information?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing. The book that you held up a minute ago, The Channel Divergences, you want to hold that up again? Yeah, notice how it's spiral bound. I just wanted to point out that between Kimberly and myself, we've torn through that book and studied that book so much that the pages all started to fall out. So I had to go get the book bound. Really great information in there. I just wanted to put in a plug for that. I don't sell the book or anything like that. Just wanted you to know. I highly recommend it if you can find it.
That's right. And this one has Mikishima was the main author. And you'll notice if you read the 3-level acupuncture balance series, the 4-part series by Dr. Fratkin, he lists several other books that are, if you want to dig deeper into the divergent channels, you could spend your whole lifetime creating a practice based off of divergent channels. So this is really advanced stuff, and there's a lot of reading and learning that you could do. So if you want to know more about divergence, these are resources that are available to you. And as I said earlier, the kidney return protocol is just one small aspect that fits under the category of divergent treatments. And the rest of this webinar is going to be focused on that protocol. So the divergent channels run really deep, and we've talked about that before. If you want to get down into the deeper aspects of the body, chronic conditions, autoimmune conditions, really complicated cases, the divergent channels is where you want to go with that. But sometimes when the patient is just too weak for even the divergent channel treatment, that is when you want to recognize that the kidney return protocol runs even deeper. And that is when you would consider using this protocol when that patient is just extremely weak and they have really low energy levels.
Hey, Kimberly, I thought I'd chime in. When we talk about energy levels, you may have a patient that's functional that has energy to get through the day, do the things they're doing. Maybe they're tired or whatever, but we're actually, specifically kind of referring to low chi. I've seen people that are functional that have very low chi and need help. And I've also seen people that are fatigued and have plenty of chi. And so I just wanted to make that distinction there. And we've all had these patients come in and there's just no chi to work with. The graph is just dead across the board.
Exactly.
So back to you.
And from a clinical aspect, I'll give more examples of this as we go, but I like to think of this as when somebody has been really, really sick and they come in and they tell me, Kimberly, I just need you to boost my energy levels. That's the kind of person that they are lacking in energy so much that even if you were going to boost their energy levels, you want to boost their energy levels to a point that they can heal, not to the point that they could go out dancing and run the marathon that they hoped that they were going to run this weekend. So this is dealing with low energy levels to the point where you can rearrange, shift things so that the body can be in a place of healing, not in a place of, oh, I just wish I had more energy so I could handle the full plate that I want to handle that I can't handle. That's those patients I like to sit down and have a little conversation and tell them there's a reason why you can't handle all of those things, because your body is telling you that we need to make some changes. And so there's some healing that needs to be done. And these are the kind of patients that we are really talking about here. So when your patient has little or no chi with which to work, I'm going to share some quotes from Mikishima. And you've had these patients. I just described that patient. That patient is wiped out. They just finished with the stomach flu and all of their reserves are gone. They don't have a lot to work with. And so you have to be careful and you have to be creative and you have to work with them in a special way just to organize that little bit of energy that they do have to work with. Before you can begin treatment, you have to first rally up whatever reserves of kidney chi remain. So the old theory goes, if your cup is empty and you don't have anything else left to give, then you have to work with what you have. And oftentimes that's the case with these types of patients. They have little energy. You want to take it and use it in the best way possible for them. So Mikishima also says, by their very nature, the channel divergences access very deep layers of visceral chi, and it makes sense that they might be used to jumpstart patients whose kidney chi is in a profound state of depletion. So the type of patient that you will have that comes in with this type of presentation, the patient experience, the way they would describe themselves to you, the way they, you've all had these types of patients. They're exhausted, they're miserable, they're recovering. They just had a baby and they gave all their energy to having a baby and they're completely depleted, or they've had a chronic condition for so long that they feel horrible, they feel miserable, and they're coming to you for help. They're lethargic, perhaps they're autoimmune, perhaps they're chemotherapy patients, perhaps they're hospice patients, and they have very little energy to work with. When you're looking at their graph, you'll notice that their energy levels are really low. Notice this patient, their energy level is 25%, and their chi level is way down in the blue area. We need to lift their chi levels in order to help them to heal. And so this is a typical presentation. Oftentimes they're worse than this. This example has some higher pericardium, heart, and small intestines, which we could analyze that if we wanted to. But the whole thing to recognize here is that their average, this green line, their average is really low. So this one is 25 in the example. So there are 3 points that you are going to use when you're doing the kidney return protocol. It is simply bladder 40, bladder 23, and bladder 11. And the way that these points work together is kind of magical. So bladder 40 is the Hasse point of the bladder channel. And if you remember studying from a TCM perspective, that the Hasse points, they run really, really deep. So if you're trying to access the deep energy of the body, you want to use a Hasse point. And I've listed several of the benefits of this point of bladder 40. I think what I want you to recognize, bladder 40 is really powerful because recognize that all 3 of the points that we're using are from the bladder channel, and the fact that it is the command point of the back. So you're not only running deep, you're using this point and you're giving extra energy to all the other points that you're using on the back in the process. And I love the thought process that it clears heat from the blood. So if you can imagine this patient with really, really low energy, they are definitely yin deficient. And I mean, you can have yin and yang deficient as well, but oftentimes they go simultaneously for a really chronic sick patient. And so to clear the heat from the blood, blood that's not moving, chi that's not moving really well, to resolve some of the heat so that it can move as it needs to. So that's bladder 40. The next one is bladder 23, which is the back shoe of the kidney. So imagine you're using bladder 40 and then you're adding the back shoe of the kidney with it. And if you look at some of the elements of this point, it strengthens the kidney, which is where the ancestral chi is. It's that it's where the essence is created in the body. So it also benefits the essence, and it strengthens the tonifies the yin, and it strengthens the transformative action of chi. So if you are trying to take this patient and take them to a new level, and you're adding bladder 40 and then you're adding bladder 23 to go with it, you have to create a transformation type of process within the body, because if a patient stayed at a low energy level, this is the state of my hospice patients, or my chemotherapy patients are in this state of being, and they are at the lowest levels of how much chi they have left. And so the combination of these 2 points just makes perfect sense. And then finally, the next point that you're going to add is bladder 11. And when you look at the thought process of bladder 11, can you tell that I'm a points nerd? I get all excited. I left my face up because I get very excited when I talk about points. And I was the girl in college, and I would just study all of the thought processes of a point. And to me, it's like creating a recipe as you put them all together and you create this magnificent flow of what needs to happen. But it's the influential point of bones, and it's the sea of blood. So think of bone marrow, and think of blood, and think of source chi, and the fact that it is also a crossing point for the bladder, the small intestine, the triple energizer, the gallbladder, and the governing vessel. So anything that's happening in this upper body that needs to transform in the process of your treatment, bladder 11 is a crossing point for all of those. So you're opening up the tension that's happening in the shoulders, and you're opening up the governing vessel, and the triple energizer, which deals with the whole middle section of the body, and the small the digestion within the intestine. So it's just a beautiful combination of points. And when I put them all together, the Kimberly analysis here is, to me, just imagine that a patient is really, really sick, and you're going to give them the best nutrients that you can. And you'd love to make them this beautiful bowl of soup that has all kinds of great ingredients in it, but they're not even ready for that bowl of soup. All they're ready for is the bone broth. So to me, this is like a bone marrow treatment. It's like giving your patient a bowl of bone broth that that you've cooked the bones and you've pulled all the nourishment and you've pulled all of the marrow out of it, and you've put it into a simple aspect so that they can take it, so that they can become stronger, so that then they can move to the next level of their healing process. And so that's the Kimberly analysis. I know it's not very scientific, but it really fits my thought process when I am giving a treatment like this. Let's see, I will move on here. So let's talk about the clinical experience of the kidney return protocol. First of all, before I do this, Adrian, would you like to talk about the thought processes of how it wound up in AccuGraph before I walk them through AccuGraph?
Yeah, be glad to. So originally, when we were first looking at the divergent channel protocol, and I was introduced to this by a practitioner who was still doing the Akabane style with the Moxa sticks and counting the strokes on the Jingwell points, and then filling out paperwork and figuring out the whole divergent channel protocol from that. And I thought it was really interesting. It was kind of confusing. It took me a while to really learn it and be able to master it to the point that we could program it. But while doing that, he happened to mention to me, oh, and by the way, patients that are really depleted, you want to do what's called the kidney return protocol. Go look it up in the book. And so I got the book and I went and looked it up. And I thought, well, wow, that's interesting. So yeah, we'll put that in for really depleted patients. Later on, when I talked to Jake Fratkin, he said, yeah, absolutely. That's a very important protocol to know and to use. And it's also a great way to start a treatment when there's not much to work with. It gets things kick-started, gets the chi available, so then your treatment will be more effective. And so based on all that, we put it in. But to be honest, it really wasn't emphasized. And the most recent AccuGraph 5 update has kind of re-enthroned it and made it more accessible, where it'll be recommended more often if you go to the expert treatment protocol. So that's kind of how it got in there. And that's also probably why you didn't know it was there.
Exactly. And I'll have to say, from a TCM perspective, this isn't something that I ever learned in college. But granted, I didn't learn Japanese style acupuncture. I learned TCM. And then in the process, when I went and learned from Jake Fratkin and I began my fascination with ion pumping cords, I began doing the extraordinary treatments and found out that I was getting amazing results. And then began adding, when I became really comfortable with the ion pumping cords and then started digging deeper into the research and reading more books, you know, this kidney return protocol, you can't find a lot of information on it out there. And even when Jake Fratkin teaches on it, it's very limited because it's very specific. You use it when you need it and you don't use it otherwise. And from the clinical experience with my patients, you know, when I started introducing these ion pumping cords, I wanted to share a little process here. Maybe, can they see my picture? Shall I go bigger?
Hold it up a little closer there, closer
right
to your camera.
Okay. So this ion pumping cord, patients wanted to, you know, they're like, Kimberly, what are we trying next? What are we doing? And are you putting electricity in my body? And what are you, tell me about this new cord that you're using. And I like to explain to my patients, so it's this fantastic little cord, and it's really like a science project in the making. You've got this ion pumping cord, which has the power. One end pulls energy, and so the black end pulls energy from a channel. The red end puts energy back in. And the way that this cord knows how to regulate what's going on is this little thing in the center called a diode. And so I do this little explanation to my patient, and they say, oh, so you're saying that a channel that has too much energy and a channel that has little energy, you're just transferring it? And that's exactly what's happening. And so I'm not using electricity. I'm not adding electricity to the treatment. I'm using the natural electricity that's happening in their body, and it makes this profound effect. and years ago, I mean, I wouldn't even known how it could make such a profound effect, except that I've been using Accugraph for so long that I can see the profound effect. And it's so amazing when patients lay on the table, they can feel the difference immediately. So before I move on, so I was telling my patient about this the other day, and I was telling him I was writing up this webinar and I was going to be teaching this class. And they said, so tell me about these ion pumping cords again. And I gave them my little explanation. And I said, you know, if I was just to put a needle on one channel on your body and another channel on your body, my goal is to, if a channel is low, to bring more energy up in that particular channel, and if a channel is too high, to bring energy down. And then as chi flows, as it reaches the center of the body, everything, all the organization, everything works itself out within the 24 to 48 hour process of the treatment. And I said, this jumpstarts things. This says to me, things are so deficient or messed up. So if you're using the extraordinary vessel or the divergent treatment in general, it's because, not necessarily because they're depleted, but everything is so disorganized. So I literally get to bypass the central system of the body, and I get to pull energy from one channel and put it into another, so that as they reach the middle of the body, then everything organizes and comes together, and I can do it much quicker. And my patient said, oh, so it's kind of like you're building an interstate. And I'm like, exactly. That's the simplest answer. It's like I'm building an interstate, and it makes things happen so much faster. So having said that, that's my little story on the ion pumping cords. And I just love them. They are so effective, and they've made it easier for me to treat really hard patients and pick things up a whole nother notch in my clinic. So I'll move back to my presentation now. There we go. So how's this going to happen in your clinic? If you're an Accugraph user, this is what you will experience. And by the way, if you're not an Accugraph user and you're just visiting our webinar, obviously, Accugraph can help you to recognize when to use it, but I'm also going to teach you what those points are and how you would use it. You could use it regardless if your patient had the type of presentation that we talked about earlier. So first, you're going to graph the patient. And notice that I've graphed the patient, and this is actually example patient. This graph should be in your Accugraph. What is it, 2005? August 1st of 2005, shows how long Accugraph has been around. So this is the baseline treatment, and we're showing the upper body, the hand channels and the foot channels, and we have it on baseline, and I just graph the patient, and the point recommendation is based on tonification and sedation. Then, if the average is less than 40, then you proceed. So notice that the green line that comes across, this always shows the average. And this patient's average is, in this graph, it's 29. So because the average is less than 40, then the kidney return protocol will show up in Accugraph. If the average wasn't less than 40, it wouldn't show up. And I'm going to show you how to find it within Accugraph. So right now, notice we're clicked on the baseline treatment, the one that's all the way to the left. There's 6 levels of treatment. The very first one is basic, tonification and sedation points and luo points. That's what's recommended. So to recap, if your average is less than 40, then you would proceed because you would want to possibly use the kidney return protocol. So now I'm changing what I'm clicked on. Before I was clicked on baseline, now I'm clicked on the third one over, which is called expert treatment. And if I click on expert treatment, you'll notice that the kidney return protocol shows up as a point recommendation in that process. Then you will, so here's the side note, here's another example patient, and this patient's average was 102. When you click on that expert treatment, notice that there's not a kidney return protocol that shows up as listed. Whereas previously it was, because the average was low. And if your average was not below 40, it's not going to show up. So that's my little side note. So we were at number 3, click on expert treatment. Number 4, then you're going to click on add points to the treatment plan. So notice that it has several points that you can add to the treatment plan. If you click add points to the treatment plan, every point that you see here in the treatment is going to show up. So you could add them individually. You just want the kidney return protocol, you could click on those and add them in, or you can just click all of them and then delete the unnecessary points, which is probably what I did. And just remember that the ones that you want to keep, if you're only doing the kidney return protocol, they're blue and red. So notice in the treatment plan, you have bladder 40, which is blue, and then bladder 23 and bladder 11, which are red. So we'll move forward here. So notice that bladder 40 is always blue and the 23 and the 11 are always red. They will always show up that way. This is different than in the divergent treatment protocols where sometimes some would come up as excess and some as deficient. This is always how this happens. The whole thought process here is that the bladder channel is big and large and abundant and has typically a lot of chi in it based on the fact that all of the back shu points are there. It's the biggest channel in the body. It's very close to the surface. So there's excess to be pulled from the bladder channel. So bladder 40 is the deep, we talked about the points individually. So it's pulling excess through bladder 40, and then it's putting it back into the bladder channel. Well, it's putting it into the kidney channel and to the bone marrow via the bladder channel at the back shu point and bladder 11, like we talked about earlier. So that's the thought process, and we'll talk more as we go on, but that's why bladder 40 is always blue and bladder 23 and bladder 11 are always red. So next you're going to insert your needles. Simply insert them at bladder 40, bladder 23, and bladder 11 on both sides of the body. I recommend that you use stainless steel needles. You can use Sarins if you have to recognize that you are going to be using clips on the needle. And so if you're using a Sarin, you want to be very cautious and only clip on the metal portion. I just tend to use the stainless steel so I can clip wherever, but you want to clip onto metal. Yeah, so on your chat section, recognize that if you have questions, please list them there. And when I get to a stopping point, I'll be answering all of your questions. Next, you're going to add the ion pumping cords, and you will be using 4 ion pumping cords. So cord 1, I typically just start on the left side of the body. I don't know that it matters if you start left or right, but I would take cord 1 and I would clip the black end on bladder 40, and then I would clip the red end on bladder 23. So that's the back shu of the kidney. So that's cord number 1. Cord number 2, you're going to use that same bladder 40 and you're going to clip the second black end on that. So bladder 40 is going to have 2 cords attached, and then you're going to click the red on bladder 11. And then for cord 3 and 4, you're going to just duplicate that process on the other side. So the important thing to recognize, it was hard for me to figure out at first when I was thinking, wait, there's 4 cords and there's only 3 sets of needles, and that's because bladder 40 always will have 2 cords attached to it. I've given you 2 different views. One on this slide here, I'm just kind of showing you cord 1, 2, 3, 4 and giving you the thought process. The reality is you'll be looking at your treatment plan and you'll see bladder 40 left and right, and you'll see bladder 23 and bladder 11 left and right. And this is what you'll see in your Accugraph, and this is what you're wanting to create on your patient with your ion pumping cords. Next, I'm going to talk about treatment strategies. So you can use these ion pumping cords. I'm going to tell you 2 different ways to think about them. One, you could use it as a standalone treatment, and you literally would just use this protocol all by itself and call it done. So as a standalone treatment, what you need to recognize is that within 10 minutes, the treatment is complete. But don't let the 10 minutes be like a red flag, like, oh my gosh, 10 minutes are over and now I need to pull the needles. It won't hurt for you to leave the needles longer. Typically, I'll put the treatment, I'll leave the patient under a heat lamp and let them relax. It's a very relaxing. Patients fall asleep, they drool, they like a nice blanket over them. They like the heat lamp. Remember, this is a very deficient patient, so they're not going to lay there robust and hot. They're very weak, and so they enjoy the relaxation time. But the treatment is done in 10 minutes, but you can leave them longer. So that's how you would do it if it was a standalone treatment. And then the next level is that you could actually use it as a jump start for your treatment. So Mikishima says the kidney return protocol rallies the kidney chi and therefore facilitates the rest of the treatment. So let me show you how that would look. Step 1, do the kidney return protocol for 10 minutes. So this is different than when I'm explaining the divergent channel treatment. In the divergent channel treatment, when you use ion pumping cords, if you're using it as a root and a branch, I teach that put the needles on, or put the needles in and put the cords in for the divergent channel, and then quickly add your branch treatment to the process and leave the patient. This is different. If you're using the kidney return protocol in a 2-step series, you want to do the kidney return protocol for 10 minutes, then take out the kidney return protocol, then move to the next stage of your treatment. Because the kidney return protocol, it has a job. Its job is to take that the little bit of resources and energy that's in the body and reorganize it so that the next level of your treatment can be more effective. I hope I'm making sense on that. So, and on your next level of treatment, what I learned through Mikishima is that he used a lot of creativity. He never had an exact, you have to do this, and then you have to do this, and then you have to do this. He had some thought processes and protocols that he taught and he used, and he mixed them up in different ways. But if he was going to use it as a jump start to the treatment, to reorganize the resources that were there and then move on to the next phase, he might just add the extraordinary vessels into the next treatment, or he would use the ear point. So it's kind of a whatever you decide. This might be a good way to talk about, a good place to chime in, Adrian, and we can talk about how Mikishima did things a little different. You have multiple ways that I'm teaching the ion pumping cords, and that's the way that I use them and the experience that I have. And I actually learned that through Jake Fratkin. But we had a couple other ways to mention. Did you want to chime in?
Yeah. So, oh, wow, I'm getting an echo. Is that better? There we go. Okay. So a couple of things. Number one, you could always use electrical stim. This is what Mikishima tended to do. You just use the positive and negative polarity like you would on the ion pumping cords. And then you set it up. He used 1 hertz for the frequency, and he would run it for about 10 minutes. And so that's a great way to do it if you like using electric stim. Another
I think he used
great approach, you can use laser. Sorry, what's that?
1 to 2 hertz with 5 to 10 milliamps.
5 to 10 milliamps. Yeah, thank you.
I would never hold that.
And that's one great approach. The other great approach, you can use laser for this. So you can use red laser to tonify and a blue laser to sedate. And that is something that I've talked to practitioners that have done and gotten good results. And so no matter which way you try to do this, as long as you are focusing on the right points for the right reasons, you can get good results. Now, for those who are actually interested in the ion pumping cords and who want to use that, because in my opinion, it's the fastest and easiest way. You don't have to have outside electrical tools or anything. It uses the body's own electricity. Just put in the needles, clip it on, and the body self-treats. It's a beautiful thing. So we do have those available. I'm going to put up a link for those who are interested in getting some ion pumping cords or start adding, if you already have some, we have a starter pack available where you can save some money, get enough cords and a tester that you can implement this in your practice if you're not already doing it. So back to you, Kimberly.
The other thing that I recognize is that Mikishima also would use gold and silver needles. So back in the time of, I won't even say back in the time. If you are of that thought process in your treatment using gold and silver needles, I don't do that, but that is a way that he did the treatment strategy. Let's see. So after you've done step 1 and you've done the 10 minutes, then I like to add the ear treatment in, and that's where I'll reorganize the chi, and then I'll scan the ear and figure out, or not even figure out, let the energy reshift in the body through treating the ear. And I know that Jake Fratkin likes to treat the ear as the secondary approach. And I think Mikishima liked to use the extraordinary. I switch between the two, extraordinary and ear treatment. This is actually a picture of one of the gals in our office. She came into work after she had been sick for the weekend, and she was just really zapped of energy. And she said, "Oh, you have to help me have my energy back so I can take care of my kids." And I told her, I said, I gave my typical little lesson. I said, "I'll help you get your energy back, not so you can take care of your kids, but so that your body can heal. What I'm hoping is that you'll go home and rest and spend time this weekend resting." So we did the ion pumping cord, and then we did the ion pumping cord kidney return protocol, and then we treated her ear. And before she even left, she came in and she said, "Wow, instead of being completely empty, I can feel my energy level coming back up." And sometimes that's just the jump start that they need in order to begin the healing process. And we're just helping their body. So let's see what I have next. So this is kind of fun, the results that you can expect. So obviously, the protocol's been around for a little while. Mikishima has written about it. Jake Fratkin has talked about it. I've been using it in my clinic maybe for the last year, have been doing some experimentation, even more so in the last month, because now it's readily, quickly, and easily available in Accugraph. And my next slide is kind of a fun story. So when I got to Amsterdam, if any of you have been following me on social media, I taught in Europe, in Amsterdam, oh my gosh, about 2 weeks ago today. And when I got to Amsterdam, I had been traveling Europe for a couple of weeks before I made it to Amsterdam. And I was finally at the hotel and touching base with Meridia Technology. And they said to me, "Hey, Kimberly, there's some new updates in Accugraph, and we want you to put them on your computer and show everyone at Amsterdam before we release it to the general public." So that's not always, that's kind of a scary thing. You never know if there's going to be bug fixes or things that need to happen, but they insisted. And so I put them in, and I was so excited. And so this is me in Amsterdam, and I was graphing a patient. And the bottom graph is what we saw, her average of 25. And I went, "Oh, you guys, there's this new thing in Accugraph that I need to show you." And so I taught them kind of what I just taught you in this webinar about how to find it in Accugraph and what it looks like and what the kidney return protocol looks like. And so that was on Friday. Let's see, Thursday. We taught on Friday, Saturday, I guess. So that was on Friday. And so I was able to do the kidney return protocol. And so what happened after that is I went on with my strategy, but we did the kidney return. I showed everybody, so we graphed her. And then the next day when I got to class, there were people who were saying, "Hey, Kimberly, you should regraph that patient because you did the kidney return protocol. Let's see what it did." And I kind of gasped because here I am teaching, and I hadn't done a lot of experimentation at home to graph and regraph and see what the results were going to be. And so I said, okay. And then I gave the disclaimer. I said, I don't know exactly how this is going to show out. And it might take 24 to 48 hours before we see the changes. But so we regraphed her, and the second graph is what we saw there. So that was the 24 hours later. And so her average went from 25 to 41. Was she perfect? No. She still had low energy. I would still call 41 on the lowest, on the low-ish scale, but we had an incredible, amazing shift considering that she was traveling and she sat in a chair all day, and then we graphed her the next day and everybody gasped and it was exciting and it was wonderful. And so I told them somebody had sent me this picture. So I'm glad I got a picture of it, and I'm glad I could teach you about it here. So this happened before it even released in Accugraph. So that's my fun Amsterdam story. Here's another example of what you can expect in treatment. So this patient's average was 29, and then the next time I treated her, this was a 48 hours later, her average was 41. So it definitely made the shift that needed to happen. But obviously you can see that it didn't all of a sudden raise her chi levels really high. That's not what I want you to expect in treatment. I want you to expect that it's going to raise enough so that then you can begin moving forward in the process of the healing that needs to happen. And I'm not sure. Let's see. I think I'm getting close to tying this up. So some other options that you can expect with having this new option in your Accugraph. I get phone calls from practitioners all the time who will call me and say, Kimberly, the graph is really green, but my patient is still really sick. How do you explain this in Accugraph? And then with a little further digging, we'll find out that the graph is really green, but their numbers are really low. And so it's those low numbers that give you a hard time to differentiate what's really going on. And we tend to look for, with those low numbers, we tend to look for borderline highs and borderline lows, but those numbers are so small that we don't have a lot to deal with. And we used to teach people that when the numbers are really low, if you'll use laser on the Jing well points, that will make a shift in energy. Oftentimes I'll teach people that if the numbers are really low, you want to get them on herbs and change diet and things like that. And those are all good resources, but having this other resource, which makes such a quick, profound shift, is fabulous in that process of treating. Other people that say, I just can't get the averages to go up. Well, notice that I didn't get the averages to go up hugely, but I got them to go up enough and organize the energy enough so that we could move to the next level. So I'm all about a treatment series. And so if this is something that needs to happen in that treatment series in order to boost that energy and organize it enough so that the patient can heal and move to the next level, this is a really good option. And then the last thing that people say, the other one is the numbers are so low that I can't get a valid reading. So these are all reasons that you would want to use the kidney return protocol. So I'm done with my portion. Do we have some questions here? Let me run over to the questions real quick. Let's see. Mary says, is the low chi evident in the pi score? Adrian, I don't always find that. You might want to explain the pi score portion. I know that in the energy level, is that the right terminology? The chi.
Yeah, the chi level. So the pi score looks at a number of different factors of balance. It looks at left versus right, upper versus lower. It looks at the number of imbalances, how severe they are, what type they are. All of that goes into the statistical model. So somebody with really low chi that is otherwise very well balanced may have a pretty good pi score because the low chi is only one of the factors that brings the score down. So it's reflected there, but it's not going to completely destroy the pi score.
So I would look at the chi level. That's definitely what you're going to look. And really what the average is the same number that's going to show up at the chi level. So if your average is 25, it's going to be down in the 25 in the 25% zone. If your average is 100, it's going to be in the 100 zone. Am I correct on that, Adrian?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely right.
So Kaylani says, regarding leaving in needles in a deficient patient, I was taught that it's possible to do too much, either by leaving needles too long or doing too many points. Your thoughts? I was taught the same thing, and it was definitely from a TCM perspective. And if you're doing all kinds of TCM type of needling, this is definitely a Japanese approach. It's definitely a small amount of needles, and you're definitely using the power of the ion pumping cord to do the shifting and changing. And then for me, if that patient is falling asleep and we've readjusted the energy in their body and they're under a heat lamp and they're all gushy, soft, and warm, I wouldn't leave them there for an extremely long time. But if they were there for 20 minutes instead of 10 minutes, in my opinion, I don't see that as a problem. I hope that answered that question. And then Susan asked, electrostim, sedate on blue protocol and red on red. Electrostim.
I think she means sedate on blue and tonify on red, and that's exactly right. That's what you would do with electric. And there was also a question about laser. Same thing. The blue laser you would use on bladder 40, and then the red laser you would use on 11 and 23 to tonify.
Right. So when you are laser's really easy because our lasers are blue and red, and if it is in this protocol, if it's red, then you're going to use the red laser on it. And if it's blue, you're going to use the blue laser on it for this particular protocol. And then just to reiterate, for the clips, think of the red side. If it's telling you red, use you're filling, you're adding, you're tonifying, you're giving more. And so that's what the red side of the clip will do, whereas the black is similar to the blue laser. It pulls energy out. The red puts energy in. I like to think of red like moxa or heat lamp. It's giving all of that good, yummy aspect of the treatment. It's always back to food for me, isn't it?
The good, yummy aspect of the treatment. We'll try to keep that in mind. Okay, other questions? If anyone else has a question, now is the time. Go ahead and type them in the chat, and we're glad to respond to anything.
So I have a question for all of you. Can you see value in this treatment protocol in your clinic? Is your mind already spinning onto patients you will use it for? I know that once I began using it, it was just incredible, and patients love it. And the way they describe the treatment when I'm using the ion pumping cords is they feel the shifts and changes in their body so quickly, and so they feel the shift and the move and the ping of energy as it's reorganizing and going through the body. And then they also describe deep relaxation. So I'd be curious if you're excited and you're thinking about where you'll use it, and if you're already using ion pumping cords, if you've had similar experiences. In the meantime, you've got a few slides. Do you want to talk about the dynamics on how to get ion pumping cords? I'll look at the questions over here.
Yeah, there's a few more questions. To finish up what you had, Kimberly, let me get back into the slides for just 1 minute. Okay, so if you're looking for some ion pumping cords, we have them available. You can go to our store there at meridiatech.com/shop and you can search. We have this starter pack that we've put together at a discount price, 6 cords and a tester to make sure your cords are all correct and all in good shape. We like to encourage people to test them from time to time. And to do the kidney return protocol, you need to have 4 cords minimum. The reason that we have a pack of 6 is because often you're going to be adding other things into the kidney return protocol, or you're going to be doing it in conjunction with a divergent channel treatment. And so you may need some extra cords. Also, it's always good to have an extra 1 or 2 on hand in case you break one or lose one, something like that. So hence the need for the 6-pack and hence the special that we have. The other thing I wanted to point out is there's a new update to the AccuGraph software. It's available when you launch AccuGraph 5, then it's going to automatically tell you, hey, there's an update available, click here to download. You need to do that. Those updates have important new features. For example, the kidney return protocol we've been talking about today. Also, there are patches and bug fixes. And so if you have not updated your AccuGraph, go do it. It's free. It's included with your AccuGraph plan. And so absolutely get that done. And then one other thing I wanted to mention before we close is that we've got some great training on the divergent channels, on kidney return, on a lot of these advanced topics that are really going to help you get a lot better results. And most of those are contained in our symposiums that we teach live each year. And if you are an AccuGraph Enterprise user, you already have that for free. Those symposiums, the recordings are included in your all access training pass. And that's one of those benefits that a lot of AccuGraph users may not realize they have. If you're on the enterprise plan, then just log into your account, accugraph.com/account. And that's where you have access to your free training, including CE credits on many of the symposiums and seminars that we do. We literally had one of our longtime users today who did not know, she's been with AccuGraph for years, and did not know that she had free CE credits and free training available. And so we try to always let people know, we shout from the rooftops, go ahead and avail yourself of these free resources if you need them. And then meanwhile, if you need ion pumping cords, we got you covered there.
Adrian, I get a lot of practitioners who, because I get to travel and meet the practitioners all around, and they will choose random years to bump up to Enterprise because they want to jump in and get more training. So, if you're a professional, doesn't mean you couldn't for 1 year have Enterprise and get all the training involved, and then back, you have options to go back and forth. And so
right.
A lot of practitioners, they want the live training, they want the training from the different places that we've been, and we've got an amazing team that does the recordings, and that's awesome. There's one more question in here that I wanted to, Mary said, is the protocol approach always to work from the bottom bladder 40 to the top bladder 11? You're always pulling energy from bladder 40 and putting it into the others. So I always click bladder 40 first, because I feel like if the purpose of red is to put energy back in, I want to pull energy from where it's going first, and then clip it where it's going back in. And those points will always be black and red, exactly like I showed in the webinar. So that's my thought process.
Yeah, and I would add to that, if you were to do it in the reverse, you would actually be trying to pull energy from the back shoe point of the kidney and put it into the bladder channel. And you really don't want to be pulling from kidney when you have a patient this depleted. That's why it's called the kidney return. You're trying to return some energy into the kidney.
Doesn't it stop at the diode though?
Well, if you were to reverse the clips.
Oh, if you reverse yes, you always want to, you never want to use the wrong colors on the clips. So yes, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, that's why you would never do it the other way.
The red one on first versus the black. I mean, I don't know that it would hurt anything because the diode is there to stop the process, but I just imagine that I'm taking energy from here and then putting it there. Remember the interstate.
Yeah, exactly. It looks like that's it for questions. Mary, I just wanted to highlight her comment. Mary says this protocol is awesome. I've noticed the deep relaxation effect with the IPCs, ion pumping cords, and the extraordinary/divergent channels. So relaxing for the patient. They're falling asleep, sometimes snoring, and the rest of the treatment is a breeze. I love that.
Exactly. Shout out to all of you Amsterdam people who are on the webinar today, and I got to just was there teaching you. It was fun. I miss you.
All right. I think that is, I think we've reached the end and we're right on time. So thank you everybody that attended. If you need any help, if you have questions, if you need equipment, ion pumping cords, then give us a call anytime. You can find us at accugraph.com. and we're always here to help. So thanks everybody for joining us. Have a great month. We will see you next time.